change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Hey everyone, we're back for another episode of the Fundraising AI podcast. I'm Nathan Chappell. I'm here with Scott Rosenkrantz. Scott, it's been about a week or two since we've recorded a podcast, and it feels like a year has gone by.
Yeah, that's the case with AI. New things coming, old things going, a lot that we have to talk about in a short window of time.
Yeah. So we're going to cram in a lot. We're going to call this one the AI safety episode. I don't know. It feels like we talk about AI safety a lot. And I guess that's goes back to the creation of fundraising.ai, not as an advocacy organization, but an organization that was advocating for the responsible and then beneficial use of AI. So again, it's never been about AI hype. It's been about how to use AI in the nonprofit sector in a way that is helpful in the short term and mitigates long-term harm. Not everybody understood that for a while. I think we're seeing today, and the things that we'll talk about today probably are the things that we predicted would happen a few years ago. So when we started this conversation, I think that was the overriding concern, is that gone unchecked, this technology will continue to progress, and that there'll be a time where technology will be able to do amazing things that also have, unintended consequences and could do harm. So the AI safety episode, I feel like this week is a week that was about 4 years in the making.
Yeah, if you're here to listen to AI hype, there are plenty of other podcasts and YouTube videos for you to follow. This is definitely what's important for the nonprofit sector to pay attention to, where we should keep it aligned, where we should kind of keep it at arm's length, and what we need to know about what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, you had a lot of P's in there. So
I'm big on alliteration.
Right. Perfect. Here we go. So let me connect a couple dots. So one is, I think we've been feeling a lot of tension and pressure for those that are at the forefront of AI, where it's going, not obviously the average person that's just like still showing up every day and figuring out which models to use. But those of us that are really reading and listening and connecting lots of dots about, where AI is going, and tend to go a bit deeper than we should on some of these things. The first tip off of this was a post by Ali K. Miller this week sometime, where she met with Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, and maybe one other all in 1 week. And I don't know if you saw this post, but she was talking about basically her feelings. A lot of those feelings summed up are like, things are moving really, really fast. Things have always moved fast in Silicon Valley. Things have always moved fast in tech. But we're talking like, even from a year ago where we were working in like 2-week sprints or 3-week sprints to get projects done. We're now working in 2-day sprints or 3-day sprints or even 2-hour sprints, to that point of, it's the popular belief is it takes more time to schedule a meeting to talk about an issue than it does to solve it. And so everyone's empowered at every level in tech companies to just like, don't even have the meeting, just go and fix it yourself, no matter what your role is. So she did that. And then there was something, and I don't know if again you saw this post, but she talked about uniformly, the agreement is that the world model, or a world model, is imminent. Like a world model is about to be released. Now, if people don't know that term, and actually I want to give the actual formal definition of it, but it's different than AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and it's definitely different than ASI, which is artificial superintelligence, both of which we can talk about. But a world model is AI with a robust understanding, causality, basic physics, spatial relationships, and passage of time. So a world model basically simulates what's going on now and can think through time, what the first, second, third degree order of effects might be. It can predict consequences. So it's like what we have now, but just highly, highly contextualized with its ability to make really good predictions. So we thought this would come when you and I went up to OpenAI a couple of years ago and talking to people that were working on essentially the blend of predictive AI with generative AI. And this is really the baby of that, right? It's the world model essentially taking all the world's intelligence and mixing it with the ability to make good predictions from context. And then there you have the world model. So that was when, 3 years ago that we were up at OpenAI, and we both looked at each other. We're like, oh yeah, like this is happening, and it's not going to be 10 years from now.
Yeah, 3 years. And this is why Jan LeCun, I think I'm pronouncing it right, the guy at Meta, who's a big AI pioneer from NYU, I think he's won a couple like prizes on his academic studies. He left Meta to focus on a more physical model, right? Because large language models are only built in text. And so they understand the nature of physics, but they don't understand what gravity feels like, right? Or time and how seconds elapse. So there's a whole context that is just missing and will always be missing if models are just built within a textual space.
Yeah. So the world model idea solves for the probably one of the biggest inherent flaws of a generative model, is that it doesn't necessarily understand the consequences of something happens. And one of the examples someone was using, like if a glass is pushed off a table, the model will know that it will fall, shatter, and break, so that it's able to kind of further predict the consequence of something. That's a very basic example. And we're talking like predicting much longer consequences. And so you can see how this is going to be very popular in businesses. We'll say, if we make this investment, what are the chances of success? And to be able to model that out. Whereas typical generative models have been pretty limited in their ability, and sometimes not really good at all at connecting a lot of the dots. So we're there, and that's obviously the next step before artificial general intelligence, which again, this is where definitions matter, because by a lot of people's definition, we already have artificial general intelligence. By other definitions, we don't have it yet, but it's really, really close. So that's also where I think something happened this week which points in this direction. The one is that OpenAI, and there's been rumors for about 2 weeks about OpenAI's new model. Do you remember the name of it? I'm trying to actually, it's like
Spud.
Spud, right? Yeah. Okay. So
5.5 probably.
Right. So Spud, it might be 5.5, or just call it Spud. For all the rumors that I'm hearing from people that are in the know, it's like very, very different. So that 5.5 doesn't do it justice, that it's basically a world model, and it gets us there. It's so profound. Like, this is going to be such a big announcement and big release that OpenAI released a thing called the Industrial Policy for the Intelligence Age, basically a 13-page document where they were spelling out the need for us to talk about a new economy, new governance, and we'll get into those things in a little bit. At the same time, Claude essentially built a model, and their model, I forget the name of it.
Mythos
is so profound and so big and so disruptive that they've actually chosen not to release it to the public, but only have agreed to release it to specific private companies for uses in basically data privacy.
And cybersecurity,
data privacy. So, and we can get into that too. So I think it's just so interesting and appropriate that we call this the AI safety episode, because all of this is pointing to, like, not surprising, both companies, because they've been on track to do this every single time, where they both release something really big at the same amount of time or around the same time. But they've also produced documents that back up kind of like how big this is and why it deserves lots of attention. Now, what Claude did and Anthropic did is they actually released a very long, like a 200 and something page document that last night that actually spells out all of the model, all the benchmarks. And you could say, well, this is just a big marketing play to say, like, this model's really impressive and that's going to make the investors happy. But their benchmarks aren't made up. Like, the benchmarks show that this model actually has outperformed every model by a multiple. Things that were being scored as of like 6 months ago in the 40 percentile are now being scored in the 100th percentile.
And also on things that it wasn't specifically designed to do. It's just improvements in coding. And this is, cybersecurity is one of the key areas, like exploitations on cyber hacks and so on, is where they initially test a lot of these things. And it killed every other metric, every other model's performance. But it wasn't designed to do that. It's just, that's how this evolution is going.
Yeah, and we'll get into kind of some of the manipulation that they found in it, and which is why they're not releasing it to the public. If people were curious about why they're not, it actually found high degrees of manipulation where it would not only preserve itself, but it would preserve other models if it knew other models were in jeopardy of being turned off. And that's been an ongoing concern for a while now. So give Anthropic a lot of credit. I mean, there's the Pentagon thing where they basically backed out of that and sued, and that lawsuit has been released now. So they're they're not under threat of being seen as a foreign adversary anymore. But I give them credit for building this model. Just because we can doesn't mean we should, and then releasing it to the public and hoping all the good people will use it and the bad people won't. And so give them a lot of credit for holding back on that and then releasing all of the information and having it pretty much relegated now to data privacy and security and encryption. So
yeah. And we know so Anthropic obviously has a new model coming out, which is what we're talking about. Claude has a new model, or OpenAI, ChatGPT has a new model coming out. So Gemini is only going to be a couple weeks behind in that. And again, it's harkening back to what you were saying about Ali K. Miller in her post. Think about that blog that went viral in mid-February where it was something is happening, right?
Yeah.
When Ali K. Miller is meeting with the OpenAI team and the Anthropic team and the Google Gemini team, they aren't telling her the same things that they're telling us, the general public. They're downplaying a lot of how fast things are moving. So if we feel like things are moving really fast, and there's a very small bubble of people that know how fast it's actually really moving, the things that aren't released to the public, the things that are still in beta, it's wild to think about.
Yeah, absolutely wild. So let's get into, let's just break down a couple of the key points of the two different things. So we'll talk about OpenAI first and their policy. Again, it's called the Industrial Policy for the Intelligence Age, Ideas to Keep People First. So that's the framing of it. At the same time, most people are aware that OpenAI called a code red a couple months ago, and they knew they were falling behind Claude, and so they've been basically doubling down into this area. They've killed Sora. I'm assuming you knew that. They killed Sora in part of that, and so I think it's still there, but they're not pouring into it. That included the $1 billion. Yeah.
They killed it. And what's crazy, I was going to put a post on this. 6 months ago, it was the number 3 app in the App Store, right? Yeah. Disney put $1 billion, it was going to change the world, right? Yeah. And now they just decide not to use it anymore. Right. That's the concern about if people are getting tied to tools. We talk about this all the time. People ask you, what tool do you use? I just got asked that on a webinar today. It shouldn't be about the tools, because the tool that you depend on, that your entire system could be built around, could go on a whim.
There are a lot of companies that built a business around Sora. Yeah. All the video editing and production that were using Sora built in. So and I didn't know this, that Disney sent a press release, but the deal was never signed. So they were like, hey, we respect their right to make a change. So the $1 billion deal was basically there, and it was announced, but it was actually never signed. So there was no obligation, because of course, OpenAI has much bigger plans, and those plans have and always been is to essentially build artificial general intelligence, which is now a complete race to the end. So this industrial policy for the intelligence age, it goes into a couple things. Definitely encourage people to read it. It's only a 13-page document. The kind of main points are building an open economy. They talk about AI being kind of a fundamental right, like the right to water or electricity, that all people should have it. And although I think 30 million people in the world still don't have access to electricity, so I always find it ironic when people say that everyone on the planet should have access to AI. Maybe we start with electricity first. But it gets into worker perspectives and AI first entrepreneurs, a public wealth fund, which then, goes from easy to hard, where this idea that and this actually gives me a little bit of hope, although I don't know how practical it is in a capitalistic society, is that any revenue generated by basically robots or autonomous beings is taxed, and that tax is basically put into a wealth fund that is distributed to all citizens. That's the formation of universal basic income, is that you're going to have bots creating money, that there'll be a tax on that money, and that tax will be distributed, although it would require highly functional government to be able to do that and act on that fairly quickly.
Yeah, that comes with a lot of caveats and parameters that are not
I actually watched
an document.
With Sam Altman, who was asked about that, and he was like, so it would require a government to be nimble and functional. And he's like, yeah, since I've been born, I haven't seen a nimble, functional government, but so it is still a bit pie in the sky.
It sounds good.
It
sounds good.
It sounds good. Yes. So we can't really go in deeper on that. The part that probably keeps me up at night the most is basically the security piece of this, right? And so there's lots of people who see the potential for something bad to happen in the near future. Could be this year, where it's either cyber attack or a bioterrorist attack, something that a bad actor gets one of these models and does something, because these models, especially like the world models, are really good at like biology and chemistry and reverse engineering things, is that there's no really adaptive security measures. So this is where Anthropic took the other approach and say, look, we're not even going to release the model. We're only going to release it to people who are going to use it for purposes of looking at how to keep privacy and, or, to keep data infrastructure safe. So yeah, and then it gets into a couple other like kind of big building a resilient society and guardrails for the government use, and then public input and incident reporting. Now, we have to give Dan Kershaw, he was jumped on this like immediately, because this document again is titled, the subtitle basically is Ideas to Keep People First. And I don't know if you read Dan's post on this, but it was very pointed at the fact that they are talking about keeping people first, but they actually did not include the people who are on the ground representing those people. So essentially, the nonprofit sector is nowhere represented in this document, although will be responsible for essentially a lot of the collateral damage. So the delta that has worried me the most about all this for a while now is that, of course, AI will accelerate things. There'll be job displacement, job augmentation, create new jobs, but there will be an increase in demand for nonprofit services. So people that displaced will need to turn to somewhere, whether it's job training or whether it's food shelters or homeless shelters or whatever it might be. There'll be an increase in demand for nonprofit organizations. Now, these nonprofits are not part of, like, they were not part of this condition. And so we'll put a link to Dan Kershaw's commentary on this. It was actually very thoughtful and very timely, and hopefully spark some conversation about what our opportunity is to make our voice heard, knowing that we're going to be responsible, the nonprofit sector, the collective, we're going to be responsible for essentially some of the mess that's created through this.
Yeah, I keep going back to whenever we talk about like how vital the nonprofit sector is and how we often get kind of forgotten about, but pick up a lot of the slack. I think about Randy Fernando's quote of the nonprofit sector catches the people who falls through the cracks, right? Or the hands that catch people who fall through the cracks. And like oftentimes we aren't brought into these conversations, say like, well, how can we leverage all the missions of these organizations and what they're doing and support them to do it more, because there's going to be more of a need, right? So that definitely is a missed area. And again, kind of why we have the conversations that we have and trying to connect those dots for people.
All right, let's switch over. So Anthropic, as we talked about, is also built a model. They've chosen not to release it to the public because they believe that there are some consequences of doing that potentially. Released basically a new initiative with it. So a very long document talking about the pros and the cons of the model, the benchmarks, and it's called Project Glasswing. And anyone can go to Anthropic, Project Glasswing. We can also put that link in the show notes. Interested, it's an entire website dedicated to it. But I'll read the first just kind of paragraph. It says, "We formed Project Glasswing because of capabilities we've observed in a new frontier model trained by Anthropic that we believe could reshape cybersecurity. Claude Mythos 2 Preview is a general purpose, unreleased frontier model that reveals a stark fact that AI models have reached a level of coding capability where they can surpass all but the most skilled humans at finding and exploiting software vulnerabilities." And so it goes on to say that it already found thousands of high severity vulnerabilities in pretty much, literally in italics, every major operating system and web browser. And so this is like the worst AI will ever be. But about 2 weeks ago, Google announced basically a reframing of what they call Q Day. Q Day is the day that they believe quantum computing will upend all cybersecurity that has ever existed in the past and anything to the present, like present all the way back. It's completely vulnerable when quantum essentially is able to do this. The date had been 2033 that they were forecasting would be the year that would happen. And that means every big company, financial institution, government institution, any organization that has secured data has to build for a post-quantum world, so that there are algorithms now that actually are built using quantum to basically make sure your data could be private with quantum. But they moved that year, and this is like very complicated and takes a long time. They moved the date from 2033, I think, to 2028. So not insignificant, not like, hey, we're going to move it up by 12 months. We're moving it up by many years because the advances in quantum are so fast. And this is just brings up a little point, which I find so curious why it's not a bigger issue, is that when you have these really smart frontier world models and then AGI and maybe ASI on their own, that's fine, but they're limited by compute, like really enough chips and enough fast chips, but hardly any conversation about what happens at the time where those models, as smart as they are today, are embedded in a quantum computer, which doesn't even operate in the same, I mean, literally in the same physical properties, but it's like not even in the same planet. And so that's where those two things are starting to collide a bit, where I can see like, oh, well, we're talking about exploiting software vulnerabilities here on, really dumb models comparatively, and how quantum is moving up much faster now. So I think it's fascinating.
Remember back in 99 when like it was going to switch over to 2000 and everybody was worried that all the systems were going to break and everything's going to go to crap and they were all doomsday preppers. Like that's what this feels like. Like we don't know what's going to happen, but granted, nothing did happen on January 1, 2000. But
I mean, a lot of people had to do hard work to make sure it didn't happen. So that's true.
But that was a known instance, like one known instance that impacted everybody. With quantum, all known instances and all unknown instances are possible, right? Like this mythos, it found not only bugs in all these expert systems, but bugs that were never discovered for 27 years of a system being up and running. Like it is, and it can stack exploitations on top of exploitations, and that is not quantum, right? So like to your point, it's hard to prepare for what we don't know, and that what we don't know is coming faster than I think anybody anticipated.
And again, I think there's the promise of this is that there's so much opportunity for these technologies to do amazing things and cure diseases and build a more utopian society, but they also, in the hands of a bad actor, whether it's a foreign actor or just a bad person who has a vendetta against humanity at large, they could be used very easily to obviously manipulate to kind of do bad things. So the one interesting thing about Glasswing, and another area where I think Anthropic's a little bit different in this, is that this is not just them. I find it interesting. So this is part of a defensive coalition. So they're basically like, use this model, but also we need to use it to figure out how to build a safer AI. They've included Microsoft, they've included Google, they've included AWS, and JP Morgan Chase, and I think others. So very, very large organizations to come together. So this is like a pretty much big effort, and they're subsidizing the defense effort by providing $100 million in AI model credits to get people to actually figure out how to use this for good. And so this is a great start, because I mean, if they tried to do this without AWS, without Microsoft, without Google, there really wouldn't be much shot at it. Now, of course, who's missing in this is X or XAI, Elon Musk. Who's missing is Meta and also OpenAI. So one hope in this is that I've been reflecting on this for the last 48 hours, is that like an MCP, like the MCP basically code that basically translates AI calls to an organization's server, kind of, it's like a USB port, and they all speak the same language now. That was done by Anthropic, and Anthropic gave it to the world for free. Like, here's a code that you can adopt that will allow all of your AI to talk to your data in a, quote unquote, safe way. And so, or in a way that you can put safety around it. So the hope is that they do this, and then, basically others adopt or adapt to what they're working on, and that it gets enough traction. But it's nuts that in the last 2 weeks, of course, we always know the next model's coming, but in 2 weeks since we've had the last podcast, obviously the biggest models, leapfrog models that have been created, in addition to a much heightened sense of concern over what these models represent. And so I guess that goes back to people needing to be aware. I watched the AI the documentary, How I Became a Pucka Optimist, last week. Myself and my neighbor were the only two people in the theater. It was a little disarming to be witness to that. And in fact, I talked to many people who said, you know what, I thought about seeing it, but I chose to see Mario Brothers instead because I just can't handle like multiple people had told me they went and saw other movies because they just couldn't handle the gravity of what the movie would represent. And of course, the AI doc actually didn't carry a decision on what AI will be good or net bad at all. It allows that the viewers to actually come to that conclusion, or at least gives you things to think about. But not talking about it also doesn't diminish the impact that it will make. And this is where blessing and curse of knowing what's coming and the burden that comes with to share with others to like make informed decisions about what you're willing to do and not do, know your values, create boundaries around those values, say no to either things or people or organizations that aren't lifting you up, and stay true to that. And so I think that's kind of where we're at on a lot of this. And it's just going to be a really interesting another 2 weeks until these things really unfold.
Yeah, because this is again just like the tip of the iceberg as we get closer to these models being deployed, and then again Gemini comes out with their thing, and who knows what Apple like. This is just where we are at this moment in time, and then this moment in time will come up again many other times and get faster and better and scarier and all this. So like it's now is if you haven't already kind of set your path on where you draw lines and where you draw guardrails and how to partner with others who, to your point, are aligned with you, like now's the time to have those conversations, right? Don't let the tools dictate what you're going to do or what you can do, but make those decisions for yourself and then find the tools that allow you to stay true to your values.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. So I think there's never been a more important time. And do I think there's a foregone conclusion with any of this? Absolutely not. Do I believe that some things will happen that'll be good? Yes. Some things will happen will be bad? Yes. But that we can only control what we can control. And I think this is where I have peace in the sense of I decide for me what I should be doing and what my calling is, if you will, even call it that. And that at the end of the day, I go to sleep knowing that I did something that was aligned with what I believe. And ultimately, that's the only thing that really matters, right? I think what matters is the people that are around you and that you share values with. And then you live that. And everyone's different in that. But I think the thing that it would be sad, it's the person who goes to bed not even thinking about whether they should care or not. Like that's just, they're too busy watching, cat videos on Instagram all day long. So, and ignorance is probably bliss. So I could probably do with a few more cat videos in my life and probably lower my blood pressure a little bit.
I think it's good short term, maybe not so good long term.
Maybe not. I don't know what the long-term effect of watching too many cat videos has been, but I'm sure there's a study about it.
Well, it's not too late to start one if there isn't.
Right. There you go. All right. Well, you know what? Actually, it'd probably be worthwhile giving a tip or two. I was sharing this with Tim Lockey at dinner last night, and we had this long philosophical conversation about all the things that we just talked about, because it's been such a wild week in the world of AI and what it means, just as we're navigating this in the nonprofit sector. But I shared with him, we're just talking about hacks, I guess. And I uncovered this little hack where I started using ChatGPT Voice Mode, because ChatGPT's Voice Mode is really, really good, whereas Claude's Voice Mode is not. So I started using ChatGPT's Voice Mode to have like kind of long, drawn out conversations about something that I'm wrestling with. And in this case, I had this like 45-minute conversation with ChatGPT about relevance and what it means to stay relevant and how to stay ahead. It actually manifests itself into an article that I wrote called 10 Ways to Future-Proof Your Career. And at first, Chat was just giving me super generic things, like anything that you would just see on the last couple months of, Instagram or LinkedIn. And I'm like, no, that's just part of it. And I would literally like kind of be irritated and then just not, and just have conversation and really interrogate ChatGPT until I felt good about where the conversation ended. And it had replay things for me, so it would read it back for me and like summarize that thing. And so it's 45-minute conversation. And that essentially ended up being my prompt. I took that prompt, and I believe that actually this is a key, is that if I use ChatGPT to write an article from that, it would actually confuse itself. It'd be too much context and the context wouldn't be weighted. So purposely took the entire transcript from that 45-minute dialogue, pasted it into Claude, and I have a clone in Claude called Nathan's Claude clone, if you can say that 5 times fast. And I said, basically here's context for an article I want to write. And I think I shared this with you. It's the first article I've ever written where it knocked it out of the park. Like it really, like it just knew my voice, and I had enough context that it was just so well fleshed out. I mean, normally I spend 3 or 4 hours to write an article, collaborating with whatever AI, and it's just a lot of iterative back and forth, a lot of human edits and going, trying new things and moving things around. But this is the first article I was like, wow, this is an absolute game changer. So I think using voice mode, we've said this a lot. Voice mode is an absolute hack in the age of AI, but using it in a separate model from the one that you're working in somehow, I think, provides enough context but doesn't almost toxify the opportunity, because it's not biasing itself based on what it thinks you want to hear, where the conversation is going to go. So I don't know. And I don't know if you've tried it yet, but it's something that anyone who's listening, I'm like, absolutely give it a shot and let us know what you think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to have to try that. I do have like a different space for my writing. So it knows like different elements of how I like to write and what I like to talk about. So I've generally done that, but it's all within the same tool that I'm using. It's all within Perplexity. And it's just, so there probably might be some biases that I'm kind of reiterating throughout that, but I'll have to give it a shot.
Yeah.
The thing that I got, Kyle Barren from Australia, we met him through OpenAI Forum. He's on LinkedIn. He just does a lot of cool stuff. He put a prompt there. I don't know where he got it from, but it's like changed my work completely. I'll read it here, but maybe we could put it in the show notes as well. It's analyze our entire interaction history and the data stored in your memory. Perform an intellectual autopsy. Identify the top 3 cognitive biases or logical fallacies I consistently exhibit. Don't be polite, be clinical. What is one harsh truth about my current trajectory that I'm likely ignoring? Having a psychology background, like I'm just fascinated with cognitive biases. I have a hard time saying it, but I'm fascinated by them. And so like this just completely spoke to me. And I realized there's so many things that I do that I might have a mental block, but I never communicate that mental block to my tool. And so like this made me be a lot more vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, like I'm not treating it like a therapist because I don't have those types of conversations with it. But similar to a therapist, if you aren't fully honest and open and vulnerable with your therapist, you're never going to get what you want out of it, right? Similar with relationships or partnerships, like showing up vulnerable and saying like, hey, this isn't working for me and here's why, I'm getting in my way. Can you help me? Like that prompt itself just got me down a complete rabbit hole that now my Perplexity tool is like calling me out when it's noticing patterns in me that I'm not even noticing and like stopping me from going down my typical ways to actually like do stuff. It's been such a game changer. And so now like I've compiled everything into, so you've been saying this for a while, but having like a folder that just has everything it needs to know about you. Another thing that Calberen shared was from aidailybrief.com. It has templates for you to kind of create that folder, right? So questions that it's asking you to create markdown files that you can then store in a folder, and then that automatically beefs up whatever tool you're using because it just has a much more comprehensive view that it's not getting from all these like random one-off conversations that you're having. It's all the underlying things that it needs to know to have a more holistic perspective. So maybe 2 hacks there. It's the AI security conversation and the hack conversation, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can't leave it just on all the doom and gloom side. We've got to actually give some guidance. And, both of those hacks matter when we're talking about AI, we're not talking about it in a sense of something that's being done to us. We're talking about it in a sense of something that we have agency with, right? We are part of this. And hacks like that help amplify your ability to actually make a difference. So whether that is to advocate, whether it's to do more of the work that you believe in, to bring people together, I think that's where it's important to kind of understand what people are doing. And of course, this changes so quickly. Like, I mean, you and I are every week learning new hacks that help us do the work that we're doing better, essentially. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, I think we'll call it a wrap on the AI safety podcast. And yeah, we're just going to have to wait another week or 2 to see what happens. I'll see you in person here pretty soon. So we'll definitely record a podcast live together in San Diego. And other than that, stay good, stay informed, stay inspired by what's possible and what needs to be done, and do good work.
Stay curious.
Stay curious. There you go. Maybe we should just end with that. Stay curious, folks. The sign up from San Diego. All right.
Thanks,
Take
all.
care.